at the Princeton University the Labrishmulia 영화 고급 중대
First of all, I want to thank Princeton University for giving me this excellent opportunity to visit and experience this great place of learning.
예동 예로리아 토마 아니 아메리카 레브레디 뉴스탄다 아메리카리아 용바 틴타보레라 엔 야하기 치료다 예금 저 틴타볼 쳐야래 갑자기 뉴스안에 둔자 진지 규주마도 중요하만해 다이미네 양결 가져야지 계급 안들이야 로야기 되버시라 총래 세상 아주기 에는 베즈 뭐부 쉐브레디네야 제반의 시지기 좀제 개태요 말다 이미네야 ane tadabadu and the team sum madoda de yontoyo maras.
I first visited this country in the year 2008, which was also the first time I left India since settling there. And I was only able to be in this country for 2 weeks on that first visit. The first visit gave me a very strong desire to come back, which I tried to do. It was initially unsuccessful. So this is only my third visit to the United States of America.
안다리 디 요아다 암비세르 제제 안 라브시몬트 줄리아도 드라르시 오마네지 아리기 루투다 토레시아 고급대다 야라 팀마블 총브레 드레인 주사네 아리라브시몬트 줄 신신 뭐서 소소기 로주게다 초와 간디지민데 냠스 용하기 고급 용하지다 다나신기 소소기 안에 가서 고도 야체를 당하는 드리직 체르다 라브시몬이야 드라게 레림지 쇠제 또 담보 라브시몬 레림이레지마도요 말해 대야 마체 다지 나랑 럽종 친게지 임베 남바체진 드라마다베 녜마 렉처시야다 다나신 진 가져와다 졸린샤로 이제 제림케요 말해 다 이미네 딘 제림데 엔 걸걸지 야체로 치지다 가져 아주 이 야체로 치지다 간다 다들이 샤샤
My particular reason for this visit to the United States is a desire that I have had for some time to see the great universities of this country. And this desire was born in me from my encounters with American university students in India, which gave me a strong wish to at least gain a glimpse of their experience studying in the great universities of this country. And hopefully, by gaining that glimpse, to be able to widen my own outlook. So my intention really was to come here as a student, not as a lecturer. But the plans kind of increased beyond that.
And the university truths in Drada, lecture in it, decision labda chumre lecture share to chesha tadrin duzada kandi ngarangi shang gotsumendo.
Because I'm visiting 6 great universities, I have now been called upon to give 6 lectures, one at each, which I don't know what to say about that.
아주 내 망부지에 labde nanoli nyanta ching labde dinanoli ya yebe shuche luju 망부지 안 상월로 해야지 가수해지 enthusiasm 사버라 좋아를 지게지 수수에게 마음에 미지 나로리아 지 자활랍신 주야선한 장도 다는 신기 지적 체도修상부지 주투야기 참에 좋아당 다는 신기人民 신부에 대와 망보여래 인두산에 아는 뭐지 다나 셔베 아주 로주 가실 토제 계속 총물에 재산 고주기 에네 학삼다 고주기 다 전환디기 나란리아 심규 대버선하다 심리아 전환 겸부 시라진 소수야.
The students of this university that I have met exhibit tremendous enthusiasm, tremendous commitment to learning. They have tremendous aspirations, and I feel very confident that they will do great things, and they will serve this world of ours. This morning I met with several students, and seeing their energy, their courage, their passion, their benevolent concern for the future of this world was inspiring to me.
This world somewhere, jidien conflict somewhere, nyogje khane yare, tangyo maimbe, khane yobe industane. Mazugi artificial knowledge is because university labrishime narole janshavek energy kachildegi sanandrando artificial knowledge jibugi ane sosu maobe mizi narole sosu sambadan shinjigi chawalabjin duajilia ti jibugi lakaya sanandrando ti jibugi chobachi kala khawshib chade yare temay mangasolia dendengi semlia chi kashwe seba sogom gnibo guare shiro gnibo guare kuyang ki samba guare dana shingi ninji gi kashwe ninji gi zidra bujita kandar zid tambu dus guare.
However, given that this world is so filled with conflict, external knowledge, the knowledge that we gain through study, which is by necessity is directed somewhat outwardly at the world around us rather than at ourselves, may not be enough to enable us to accomplish the great things to which we all aspire. In addition to that knowledge, we need patience. We need relaxation of mind. We need openness. And we need a compassion that motivates everything we do.
Penangadru chashawimna ani tambu kesa di chikashwe longbo kugyo dana shingi mizaine jorba chunshuru diliya kebre education labde nanjo dilichesaru education dilege kogobke chungyo mare tadene lo dunia lebe koblia chadi da dana shingi rewa 자원이 매지기 토네 다 간다 까마 비문지 체브레 이나 나랑 게라 처음에는 까마 비문지 체브티기 다 민지 토바 잠레 마도 텔레신 다 가암베 가쇼 말다 강갈로 수수 신이 지 가쇼 강에게 베즈가 제거하지 니주지 마도베 에네 텔레데네 다 가쇼지 다 미망부지 삼년 나로 까마부 차바 점시기 버지 다 창물로 내준 창물로 다 쳐있으면 그렇지 디네지 삼던 거 디네제요 내 주산에 로춘춘이 아니 강에 망부지 냐브제 미진나로리아 준도 챌린지 망부 충분해
If I may use myself as an example, I was born in an isolated place, in an undeveloped region. And there being no schools, I had no opportunity initially for any kind of formal education. But then when I was 7 years of age, without any preparation or warning, certainly without any wish on my part, I was recognized as the Karmapa. For me, it was just being given a name, but also being handed a burden, a source of trouble and endless challenges. It wasn't, as some people think, the instant resolution of all problems for me. It was a source of challenges. So from childhood, I've faced many, many challenges.
제가 참자 normal people this week 가르쳐의 얘기 강해로부터 간제임에 냠순용 유샤네 얘는 imagination 차들래 강해로 정리도 가르쳐야 되지 아다들이 인두산 디균제다 유에서 제장 다 니제 토네 제인두산 다 드린디 아니 조진 딘디지기 강해지 망부지 균이 총비 인두산에 에너지 아주 지가스에 참섬지 spiritual religious leaders 두산 배 고스지 기보지 소화 기보를 지다 luxury로 지 딘디지 나로리아야 살롱 총대바 그러지 딘디 많이 봐 다녀디 간다지 신다지 나는 살롱 총브레 거두지 나로 살롱 총브레 딘디지 거두 나는 살롱 총브텔 댄세 아니 미신다가 강에 이네야 다 가수래지 강에 털에 삼로 동안 들래 디스 수수지 가수래 삼로 동안 망아듯이 소소를 강에 총비 인자 아니 미신다기 강에 털에 비는 삼로 동안 기 가수지 마르침브르지당 다나신 딜이야 지 심쿠르 천왕 철조예지 대인주산에 다 지ringi 시야 죄제변아 gender issues 아르당 다 디지털이 미네야 덴덴게 수수기 미진앙기 천왕의 제외 토안에 엔텔리아 수수기 가수에 심구르를 첨부 용도
It may be difficult for normal people to imagine the challenges that someone like me has to face, but let me assure you there are challenges. I suppose some people imagine that being a spiritual leader, one leads a life of comfort, luxury, and ease. Let me assure you that is not the case. It's filled with challenges and difficulties of all kinds. But the difficulties that I've had to face have increased my empathy, because by experiencing so many challenges, it's enabled me to develop more and more concern for the difficulties that other beings, other people face. And so it's for that reason really that I have become so sensitive to and concerned with issues such as the gender issues and the other issues that you've asked me to address today.
Gender issue thought sharing and Tagi Modena Becablia, Jison Song, Carcer de Pelia, Carcer Pumelia, and the full ordination, Cha Tiqualia, G. Carcer, Modena Becablia, Jison Song. Chitang Gita, Carcer Peggy Pumelia, the full ordination with the Giadi, and Peggy Pumet Pumetsolia, G. Carcer. 최소기 딱 가지고 돈받지 보면 다 되게 분명히 에너지 최소 나눠려 하는 분명히 가지고지 톱다운다 안 뉴바당 다나신 리더십 다 되는지 청구하래 되게 다나신기 에너지소 나눠려야 되게 딱 안들 슈게 전부 즉 가지고 연구해야 아주 청구해버려. Today we can send and consider what some shot. Ke energy carre, Titolia, Misseg to Shebre, and Tanashi Peggy, the cable Mambuchigi, long, Nisum Julia, to the Mangustanze, Titolia, energy carre solution, Sujipcha, summer weather, Tinaji, Bezu, Gunjin Shebre. I think it's an egg to the Titolia, this Kashuriji. She should be at young and Conan to inspire some way. Conan to challenge number tell dancing around the Sim Kashuri, Gumatev Jeda, Tana Singi, and Conan to Gitaji Tilek, Chashi and the Jim Batilia, around those 0 to 2 years.
In Dean Bowden's introduction today, she mentioned that I am involved with the reestablishment of full monastic ordination for women in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. In fact, the issue of the reestablishment of full ordination for women in this tradition is not simply an issue of dharma, of religion or spirituality, nor is it only an issue of the reestablishment of the giving of vows of a certain type. It goes to the very heart of the need to protect and promote the rights of women, their empowerment, and to support their innate capacity for leadership. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has for many years demonstrated a particular concern that we find a good resolution to this issue, and assisted by many scholars, has searched for a solution. My service in this regard has been to inspire, I hope, people to support this and to facilitate in whatever way I can the activity of the reestablishment of this full ordination.
Women's empower Sidustane and Tana Shabang Azu Kiz Chumbare. But it's chin number. Some Katawan Daji, women's empower, Kashri empower, Sadi, Shetua Kawados, Pentadabjanga Shavina, full education, ye make tone, energy Pumelia, Kashreji, Pumela empowering, you made full ordination, you made our tongue. Yana Brangazuzi, Jizona Lolia Benergy, Pumegita, the short look to short Gaza. Short law, look, Chominda, Dana Singi, and Pumegi, President, somewhere that is a long Chomila, so that they call as a Shigare. Inati, J. Ever some Shigi, and Pumeliaji, 되게 full somewhere top down sanandra da empowering somewhere that the chasan ji tobe ngebas ke mewe sochi the Hindustan azuki measurement somewhere chenjia di the chi number zam number zam that the ndu mindu the the top down share energy empowering yevada the mewe ina empowering mewe the chenjia de and tachido ji kasu cheda devajimi and tisum chadi.
Many people speak about the empowerment of women, and as several of us discussed in a dialogue we had this morning, it's important to remember that the restoration of women's rights and the full empowerment of women must go far beyond mere external appearances and institutionalized mechanisms or structures. Such necessary steps as restoring the full monastic ordination for women in my own tradition, famous historical steps such as women's suffrage, even the election of a woman as president, these steps are in themselves not enough to really restore women's rights, to really empower women. And we cannot assess the degree to which women are empowered in our society, the degree to which they possess the rights that are their rights, by such externals alone.
Understanding some of the Pinsu Jigilia, Tuan Tambadang, Ning Taba, German may be Zikashreji, Pinsu Jigilia, Zawadang, Kukur Chadang, Tana Singi, the Laxam Sweme summary. The Digiquadi, the Ketchum Chadi are. Shemadabe, Lumba Mambuchi Nanol, Giga Mambuchi Nanolia. 지 분명히 톱당한다 이제 empowering 사이드죠. 마치 팀룩이 토안에 지 가르에 순급체 대바 잠시다. 야나지 public 서머베지 만조기 무슨 잠 서머베 다지 딘데가 토안에 지 가르에 닝 타고네 델리아 지 가르에 셈솔 매합체 이미냐 따지 넘주르 잠시다 다나 신들이적 토네 제대하시 근데 이미 인상 아주기 예급 가시지 나올래야 파대비 이미냐 남발래야 다지 가수에 톱단으로 찾아 예비네야 단동 안 보면에 태심 강에 무균 태대하지다 아니지 용심의 동에 무균이 용대야지 또 용구여 때 가르선 조등 아주지 지기질이야 된 담밤 인 타번에 변주지기들이야 그 고르당 자와 사무지 주모도 발 때는 용면으로 섬들 정도.
We need a mutual understanding, and this understanding has to be real. It can't be fake or contrived. It has to be loving, it has to be respectful, and it has to be founded in basic human benevolence and caring for one another. Many countries have used legislation to protect the rights of women or social pressure to promote them. And if you look at such societies briefly, it might seem that there is gender equality in them. But if you look very, very closely, there is still not gender equality. In spite of legislation, in spite of social pressure and political correctness, women still suffer inequality. So I think the solution to this is that we go beyond mere legislation and social pressure and try to really develop a love really develop understanding and real, authentic concern for one another.
다 딜라야 테라데네 아는 가수지 가수에지 라렌 단계에서 말해 배나 다기 건드시는 시에 아주 별이야 게롬 오르네션 지하골이야 계제 로니시 수시야 그래서 동아 야갈 마용 권에 계제디 고주사입니다. 드레인두스탄 로니시 수시 계시야 그래 디 오늘은 계시 시에디 라렌 단계로지 참참 계시지 시에 디제지 시에는 계제 조규면지 자연고래 드레인두스탄에 다들 무슨 라렌 단계지 거 같아 쉽지 계제 계제 간데 시에는 타마들이야 무슨 좀 돼야지 이내 무슨 드레인 대체할량 아주 액티비스트 서머를 라렌 단계
About activism, to use this restoration of the full monastic ordination for women as an example, talk of restoring it began among Tibetans in the exiled community probably 20 or even 30 years ago. Certainly before I reached India. And that talk has continued throughout these 20 or 30 years. One person after another has had things to say about it. But in spite of all of this conversation, we have not so far put it into practice. We have not applied it. And I think that in this regard, activism would consist of actually doing it, actually restoring it, instead of just talking about restoring it.
Activism sadly yes on number of some tango. Chitan Chevinang as a song living in sort of Karsuata interdependent world, the name is and it's songologic activist chadiach. Same Jigilia, Shugan Tigi Su Karachevina, Kasa Sujigi, Chawa Kandishevina, Tigilia, Shugan Tegi. The Indusana, that Ditone, the activist Lana Mandibs Games. You know, activist Momati, Tindigi, Shugan Tabata Maimba. Then Kansa Jigi Chedungane Kandar. 체동안에 consciously somewhere that 체동안에 차와질이야 슈거지 다 고가래 미유지 샤치 인텔이야 미유든 주야 체도 안에 차와질이야 슈거지 고가래.
I suppose there are two types of activists. Given that we all live in this interdependent world and that therefore our every action affects everyone and everything else, we are all automatically activists, whether we know it or not. But there is a second type of activist, which is what I would call a true activist, and that is someone who is not simply an automatic activist, but an intentional activist. That is someone with a vision who seeks to achieve a specific goal or end.
아주 진짜 액티비즘 이갈 삼동과의 개좀 쉽지 않아요. 배는 아주 지조 나눌래 배는 젠더 이슈를 지면 지조 난가 따당. 지조 난가 미기 따당한다. 지조 난가 미 삼동당이야. 지 가수의 라심을 위해 그래. 드린 디균즈데는 아주 미리기 삼동당한다. 안다는 신기 구조의 개당 토네 energy bena gender issue neare environment issue neare 상월로리아 아니 가르르 디기 슈겐 테게 여비제당 딜랑 아주 상월로는 게 여비지 아주 시에고아디 시비지 개좀 차데 여러 something도.
I think we need to be both kinds of activists, the automatic activist and the intentional activist. To apply this to the issues of gender, we need to pay attention to changing society. We need to pay attention to the views of our society at large and the behavior and customs of our society at large. But we also need to take responsibility for our own views and behavior as individuals. This is also true in our stewardship of the environment. We need to take on, or at least share in, our own individual responsibility as a member of the aggregate that makes up our society in stewardship of the environment as in other issues as well.
United Hindustan, the Mikashilia, that the Hindustan, Sosulia, Tindegi, Chawala Shuni, Gain Kriagi, Samba Yuna Menea, Twendam, Mazuchigil, Javachi Hindustan, Jigilia, Shugan Tegayavati, Mazushia Chakwati, Ketchum Chadiare. That is social and gain, Yang, Maya, that on Javati on the yard. That didn't never the Karasana, Mazun Gange Kurne. Mazu Kulonji Kurne. Miyuji Sone, Lagachati, that exhibits Mamarudi, the Chagare. That dig exhibits the Yakog Ketchudi, Gulon the Ketchuchi. So say, Miyu the Gulondi, Savage Yogajidan, Energy Kashwe, number Tower of Yogati, Ketchuchi, Chadi uses.
Although some people may not intentionally or actively undertake responsibility, we all, whether we believe it or not, share in our common responsibility for preservation of the environment, for issues of social justice, and so on. The other type of activist, the true or intentional activist, is someone who consciously undertakes responsibility, who takes upon themselves a greater responsibility than they would otherwise have by necessity. And in such cases, when we become intentional or true activists, the most important thing is our motivation, our true aim. It's important that our goal or aim be very clear and that our motivation be very pure.
Yeah, social activist Mambo Tonyo, Manche the days Chicarway. Very angry, somebody. Manche the angry things yard. Karasana angry chadi, Kuzu Miyuji soon, or Kuzu the Kange Manguski. Ina Guaka Tongaman, Chizon and Gua, to Mavatondusan, T. Semnage, that Tungas and Andrab, some emotional. Charuchi Midusana, social actives, Mambuji, the Mambujilia, the assembly ganges, the Kozulia, and the Koz Tambug Miyugi, Gulon, Zangmadi, Kaligali, Chizoki, G. Nizulia, Denche, Gulondi, and G. Nokwandu charge. And the social gange charge, the Legion or Kasure, Rodanovci, Israel.
I've met many social justice activists, and the majority of them are angry. I think the reason that we become angry often as activists is frustration. We set ourselves a goal, a change we wish to effect, and when we don't observe a change, when we don't observe success in what we seek to do, it begins to affect us emotionally, at which point our goal has been, in a way, muddied by our frustration.
The aspirations of social justice, the aspiration down, because me, the lonely individual. That the one that Nedi, Gajre, Deliaji, remen di shukship juajilia community that do shuadi that get jum chadiare says randa ji myolam tumperson and rando randa aspiration jigwe in them this is the nyamde cheje the jig tone kandaranga jogi any susik aspiration di lonely in the jidang and dana sing diji nyumjung de ji nyumen de ma cha chi that the new the control to alia ma jogi da kandra the community do shukwa ji manzo do shukwa di get jum chi chadiyo susik myolam di 간사 신기 명람단 잡았어요지. 근데 그 토네 가르쳐야지. Come together. 그렇게 해야 돼. 계속 있어요.
Our aspiration for social justice can never be a lonely one. It must be one that is cultivated in community. Great aspirations require community. They require the fellowship, the company, the support of other people who share the same goals and have the same concerns and motivations. By embracing community and fellowship in our aspirations, we will no longer feel ineffective or powerless. Being connected with others, coming together with others in this way seems to be important or even essential for the protection and growth of our aspirations.
배낭 안으로 차서면 딱 그건 spiritual leadership. 니주 가시 니 전도 매 말하되 이내 안하지 생년로지. 저와 점년로지. 꾸마치년로지. 고야래. 남경 아주지 시야죠 알아. 배나 이 상기가 마 최시도 사네. 상기 최시에 마셔 받아. 최 신도 매번 말하되 이내 다지기 미지기. 지 최시로지. 지 꾸마 쉬고야지. 다 되게 저 되는 시체죠. 간다라 드린 주산에 나를 이미네 미망부치기 배나 gender issue 이내래 다나 신기 디나로네 배나지 결혼의 이슈로 디수 토리미네 미저기 말에 꾸만신 연당 다나 신가래야 다지 가수에 디스 센디브치니에로부터 가시 총송 될 때인제 아니 소수관에서 지금 재고도와 성사로 지라 되는 지금 수수기 가수라다 가르쳐야 이것이 하고지 지유진도 성사로 지금 되는 니바 통보를 되는 인도산에 대균산대네 아주 미신달이야 된데 미망부질이야 전대 매바다 야나 제 미시바 말도 있는 디술이야 꾸마다 디술이야 안에 가수에 된den기 센티비체니지 고이스라.
For example, in my case, as a spiritual leader, there are some things, some responsibilities that I have to be encouraged, even exhorted to undertake. It's not that I don't wish to share these burdens, but it won't happen until someone asks. Traditionally, we say that the Buddha, after his awakening, did not teach until someone asked him to. It wasn't that he didn't want to teach, it's just someone has to ask. In the same way, my interest in gender issues, in the particular issue of the reestablishment of the bhikshuni, or full monastic ordination for women, and these things have been brought about through the encouragement, even exhortation of several people. When people demonstrate a concern for a certain issue, I naturally think, I must do something about this. I must get involved. And their encouragement literally gives me the courage to do it. Well, in that way, we all need the encouragement and support of others who share our vision.
Tene Hindustan jizo na ki pena mina keshen da jizo nguti di solia nga su ki rawa tengwa ati kenchim shirachi. Nga su rawa chitemba rawa chitemba yimina rawa tengwa ati ta kenchim shibichi bache nga ra sonaro tu chonsons.
And I think that in the same way, we need to encourage and even exhort or appeal to leaders of societies in order to cause them to act as well.
I think time for question.
So now we're going to move to the questions that have been chosen or submitted, which I dropped on the floor. So I'll read the question in English, then translate it to His Holiness. If necessary, he actually speaks English. He just pretends not to, so I have something to do. The first question is, there seem to be lots of different motivations for activism. Activism motivated by anger, by guilt, or by compassion, for example. I think activism motivated by compassion is ideal, but I've noticed it is often much quieter, more private, and sometimes does not have as big a reach. Activists motivated by guilt or anger seem to work very publicly for change. What do you think about affecting structural change through these different kinds of activism? The activism. Awesome.
Cosmos lemendo. Tadela misegi. Tadi jilang ngisra nyamnyor shabina ngeta ke shuna singi. Activist le kulon ta keshim shim chade aju. Khashe jik dik jik karre. Ta anger of chede be guilty that and damne mangbo singo ta ke shebna si. Joatina mangbo shedo wada. Nga tsuyu kita miyu dhubdi qarshwe. Miyu dhubyaadi, miyu dhida dhugu yaad. Miyu dhubdi chevaliya, and dhiji qarshwe dhaji. Miyu dhugu mewe imina, susu ki jik cheyaadi sangbo imba jidang, and yakbo ji imba jik. Tijibu ki ngageki, ngageki kurchi shimi imina, and tendar druyade kalakaushim chadi or something. The Hindustan Kechishudi and Nazugi and Chawad Druyalia, Pendoha, Chijun Dan, Ben Diz Kashwe, Shiwa Dan, G private Guyananda, Aman Diz Kashwe Diz Zubundovijan Dana, public Kashwe more sort of demonstration of the Guyananda. That is Nedana Dan, Charchimadong, Yoduki Shia, the Kalahostando. Yimbineam. Samsung 아주 니주지 같은 거랬잖아. 되네 베네지 삼성 누초다 샤르쇼 베기 버룰리아 강에 체디와레 누초바 카시에기 아니 샤르쇼 베네지 카르웨 젠더 이슈를 붙는 거 게셰드스다네 안 나주 야고에 희수 도자레 샤사르 들리지기 간다르 코즈기 야나 지 사자 딜리야 베네 사자 가게 뭐지리 그냥도 야부치민도 사르 시엔도 사네 다디 삼성 create more so 가르웨 conflict 차대하는 지당 다디 용대지 용거래 아주 인도산 디균선대네 엔 삼성 아주 activist 되줄이야 more sort of soft more 가르웨다지 space 니지 과대 개좀 차디가 단 너는 안들 가시외지 미유 주야리아 개좀 차마도베 so emotional samaru 수수기 가르 샘소르티기 시비지기 가르웨 샘 천한 김보를 체지 샘소르 슈체 차네 근데 차위나 나 깔아 가고 싶지 그래서 정도 이 situation 딜리아 도나시나면 선수를 쇼체잖아. 안 돼서 강의 길어서.
As I said a few minutes ago, for any activism, a motivation is of the greatest importance. As mentioned in this question, in activism we could be motivated by all kinds of things, such as anger and guilt and all sorts of things. But in activism, we are trying to accomplish a goal, a specific goal, and that is what we need to do. We will not be able, however, to accomplish our goal as activists if we approach our activism or approach the accomplishment of our goal with the arrogance or pride of thinking that we are somehow better than others, that we are good or better. As far as the demeanor with which we conduct our activism, it depends upon the specific issue in which we are involved or with which we are concerned. Sometimes a quiet, even private approach may be effective because of its softness. At other times, it may be better to be more loud, even raucous, and very public. But sometimes we are loud and raucous when a softer approach would be more effective. For example, returning to gender issues, sometimes Westerners will point to Asian or other Eastern cultures and say, we have gender equality, you don't. Our society is therefore more advanced, more developed, more evolved than yours. Our way of doing things is better than yours. You should drop your way of doing things and do it our way. Well, for obvious reasons, that kind of approach sometimes can simply create more conflict and more resistance. In such situations, being soft, being spacious in our activism will be more effective. In addition, we need to remember that the purpose of being an activist is not to be concerned with our own feelings, our own emotional involvement. The purpose in being an activist is to get something done, to bring a resolution of whatever issue we are concerned with or involved in. And I say this because sometimes, because we can become so emotionally involved in our particular cause or issue, we start to pay too much attention to our own emotional state and too little attention to the actual issue or situation that we are supposed to be dealing with to start with. The second question, it seems that there are many people who understand environmental issues, such as climate change, and why they are important, but don't do very much to change their behavior. Why is this, and how can we best encourage such people to change?
That is smoking consumption summer bedaji. Tamathiarba. Smoke. Smoke tilia kumdi. Didn't double chadi are. Smoke Tamathia diliaji Tama ji dinsa Tama ginalo Kasa isilia Tamathia mijobi public area Tamathia mijob rules Danasin Tana Tama Gumjung. Not only any around the smoke is killers, but that tea and is bad jar than damage. Tea shore day in a tea. Mazur Pingomana. Tanduine Kasuaji, the smoke, the issue, Mudin draw the achi. Sometimes this kept down the channel. Tama the Ningasawa is the Kabda Sorchi. The Kenzarus channel. Then I see Chen, information 당 지가주에 지 대시 잡음식 아주 팽민도 다 조대 아주리 motivation 과디 자외 시제기 아주 motivation 체시하디 오늘전에지 레베 나롤이야 지 구육이 거를 계시하던 가지고대 삼 니주 고도에 좀 마세비 닝기기니 소소를 천하래 붙여야지 개점심 차대 여서 삼정도 motivation이 교와 담바 이미나 아니 아주 군주는 교원도 그래 군주는 교와 침비미나 아니 아주 여기 아니 지 니마르지기 지 초와 계단이야 교원도 그래 되는 교와 침비미나 아니 신에 된된 가수지 쿠율이야 교와 땅도 그래 삼정이 마다비 쿠육이 순교당 디도데 지 demonstration 샤당 지 니만 가셔질이야 very active 제야 디지뷰기 핑계와 많아 따디 니마르지 수수 좋아하는 자와 예브래 따디는 인지미지 맞을이야 디브 가져다지 이모션 가져다지 디 굴롱 띵습지 거야 돼 계십시 차대 면서
It's a lot like smoking, for example. We've got to the point where there are very few places you can actually smoke. You can't smoke in public areas. And the information about how bad it is, how bad smoking is for your health, is readily available. There are warnings on every package of tobacco or tobacco products. There are even advertisements about how bad smoking is. And yet, it's not enough to stop everybody from smoking. Information, explanations are not enough. There needs to be a strong, deep, fundamental motivation to change our behavior. Simply knowing that we should, that it would be better for us or better for others, isn't enough. The knowledge we gain from information is stored in our brains, but it doesn't necessarily communicate itself to our hearts. We are only willing to change when we feel a strong motivation to do so deep in our hearts. Once we feel that motivation, then we will change our behavior. And if enough people change their behavior, we will succeed in preserving this environment. But in changing our behavior, simply doing something dramatic one day is not enough. It has to be a day after day, a constant effort and constant, based on a deep conviction that comes from being fundamentally motivated to change.
베나텔리아지 남베기 떠르부터는 낸지 겹슬라위미나 겹단지 유기래 나 개경에 숨수쉬었잖아 시단지 유기래 이나야 다 나양 까마비 미지 구에 빈자 네 개기 숨수대야 랑기 낭기 남베 떠르부던 잡아야버지 차로로 마다베 까마비 숨진들이 야네 남베 떠르 시단들이서지 가르 처음으로 다이네 개바스케면도 남베 떠르 토는 셰비난다 나라도 게스스 토는 셰비미난다 소디 가르스는 based on true love somewhere 지금은 이제 세와 시샤버를 드리지 또 하네 임베체 지금 되샤다 세벌로서 어디 시샤 뒤조만 임베체 세와 시샤버를 쉬위네 지금 그래 세와 시샤로 메나 and 당기디 게더 레스비 디스 지보 말다 지당 아주 common somewhere 되지 가르를 포다모 딘디 자와이면 포뮤 파르 자와이미냐 다 대양 덴데 지 되샤 조르 제미나 안데 야부스케 말아 봐 안데 인두스탄데 균셀테네 아주 사모타한테 디지털 삼당 랑원이냐 디 삼당이야라 남배기 최응원이 지당 남배 최응원의 시합입니다. 아내지 가르에 kimba pomyo ji sowa gedang tela shibji ge nangbe ngene ji ndi chiagoro ndi chiago mares rule no sharang ji karwe de shuchim shibji mize ta ju domba yebine ni ju khare shema do be ndidan di sa du shibji yo mare de bisan ti junze dem ha de ji shyamen de samtang.
Well, there might be a difference between a traditionalist Buddhist answer to this and my own personal answer, which of course brings up the issue that since I'm the Karmapa, my answer would become sort of a Buddhist answer. The way I think of it, however, is this. The issue here is true love. In any relationship, whether it is between two people of the same gender, two people of different genders, if the relationship is founded on, based on true and genuine love, and not just physical desire, then it's authentic. But if a relationship is based only on desire, only on gratification, and not on love, then whether it is a gay relationship, lesbian, or heterosexual relationship, it's still not going to be very good. So the issue here is love. And that is what makes a relationship authentic and valuable. In traditional Buddhism, of course, there are lots of rules governing the behavior of householders, which is to say non-monastics, lay people. And then, of course, if you're a monastic, then everything is off the board. How do we balance a need to be compassionate and gentle in our discussions of gender equality with our need to be heard and the immediacy of the problem? How do we engage in productive dialogue with people who do not necessarily want to listen?
Listen. Tadi samsamji karweji ngachu samsam different angle to samdangwa de kechim shibimero samtangdo. Bena kaduine sosu siapa bonruji perubo nyemba bonruji mahimche sosuine nyemba bonruji perubo siapa bonruji bina kandiribshade ta kandra sosugi tadangazu compassion seade jiborere karwe kadui bine separation cheche ji karwe daji karwe kansa ni yeberbi samro madam cheche 간다주 수수디 네버디암 디 코사들 예비체제 근데 지금 삼 동과한테 개좀 쉽지 차되면 좀 정도스 가야서는 아주 망고지 거뒤 이미네 초 집에 삼 당바 야나지 수수 거뒤에 시에 댕게 지금이네 생경기 인면에 삼 당마다 년게데 삼 동과 말아 배나 최생계 망고지기 년게는 깔래 가지 하고 온다 다 년게 될 때지 때 수수니 아주 디강해야 다 삼상 아주 traditional 최시에도상 주주 숨시들의 시에샤 생계데 코란베 하르 레지게 시에디가래 근데 코란 강해를 다지 강해 매서 말로 다지 뒤순 교부 싶지 않아 다 마저들이 최년gen데서 다 주주 숨시들상 다디 상으로 이거 좀 도만 다 고도 강해 같이 돼야래 근데 다디 소수 최년gen디 맞아봐도 디 강에 가리면디 하고 온다. 이제 조그르비 시한 원 조그르비. 조그데 가르서 온디 촌도 제거리야. 미직 최시에버스 최시도 산에. 안 담보 미망고 예버차. 미망고 예버지. 근데 그 최시도 산 미드즈레레 니르치 퇴원신 버렸어. 안 담아도 미직 하려 알았어. 딱 그 취에 상마시에서 내 콜이야 안 투지 취에서 그런 게 나래배 년바 투지 취에서 나라서 어디 미디기 콜이야 안게 교랑게 계제니 냐 체데 데 means 나 교랑게 제일 계제 생에디 근데 데 고데 슬라라 아 된다 비시 봐 전화로도 들리시죠 되는 아주 앵글도 돼 저기 하고도 계속 보시면 됩니다
Sometimes we need to think of different angles, different ways to communicate with or appeal to people. We assume communication by our talking and the other person listening. But that's not always the most effective way to get through to someone or communicate. Our compassion has to go beyond the perception of ourself and the person with whom we're dealing, to whom we're speaking, to whom we're listening, as two different people. We need to be able to put ourselves in their place. We often think of things, including the issues that are dear to us, only from our own perspective as a talker. And that causes us to talk at rather than to people. For example, someone who is teaching a Dharma, a spiritual teacher, needs to keep in mind the growing fatigue of their listeners. In traditional teachings, sometimes you are supposed to go on for 3 or 4 hours teaching. And when you're the teacher, of course, you're exhilarated. You're enthused by your topic. And so the time passes very, very quickly. But without your being aware of it, you've gone way beyond the attention span of your intended listeners. Actually, it reminds me of a joke. Someone was giving a lecture, and at the beginning of the lecture, there were many, many people listening and attending. And one after one, they started leaving until by the end of his lecture, there was only one person sitting there. So he went up to the person sitting there and said, "Thank you for attending my lecture." And the person said, "Oh, I wasn't here to listen to you. I'm just waiting for the next lecturer." So sometimes we need to try different angles. The next one. I am a college student who now lives in New York City. Having spent many years of my youth in mountains, surrounded by dense forests and river valleys, I cultivated a very deep relationship with nature that I find difficult to be away from. Though New York can be seen as an extreme city space, how would you recommend a person not living in nature stay in touch with it?
다들 알 전화를 집어주시는 아라인에 이제 전화 정시 중뒤에 배 야채에다 간다를 다 간다 이런 좀 구요를 지난 전화 좀으로 제가 삼삼 narrow streets 말하면 종길 부수다 붙는 레디스 괜찮아를 지 어디도 레인주스안에 당가 다들 미세 가수에 아주 크루디 간다 다당 나랑 외에 쿠유리아 숨깁지하기 지 심쇼를 영화데 저 딘데 삼버데는 정말 레인주상 아주 딘데기 아주 여기 쿠유 라이에벤 제바 사모주에버디 아주 쿠유 숨깁지하기 닝도당 뉴베질리아 유튜브입니다. 야외공면을 섬들을 정도스.
Well, I have the same experience. I was born and initially brought up in a pristine, entirely natural and very spacious environment. So when I'm in a city space where the streets are basically narrow canyons, I can feel them closing in on me a little bit. I think that we mitigate this sense of separation from the natural environment by becoming courageous in our efforts to preserve the environment as a whole. And I find that my involvement with environmental preservation has mitigated the sense of distance from the natural environment in which I was born.
다음에 요시안 좀.
라.
다들 무슨 저기. 단주.
Oh,
Yes.
we're going to stop here.
Thank you.